Iran had warned the U.S. about the raid on Israel. Iran and Turkey warn of the risk of spreading conflict in the Middle East. Israel-Iran quarrel at the United Nations. Russia and China expressed their views at the Joint Security Council. Israel plans to immediately retaliate against Iran. Israel considered Iran's attack a declaration of war, forcing Iran to pay the price when appropriate. Iran said it had warned the U.S. of the attack on Israel in advance. Iranian Foreign Minister Amir Abdullahian said the country had notified the U.S. and issued a 72-hour warning to neighboring countries about the raid on Israel. "We have informed the White House that our activities will be limited, only at a minimum level and aimed at punishing Israel," Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian said on April 14. Iran's foreign minister added that the country also gave neighboring countries 72 hours notice of retaliation against Israel. "We have informed our brothers and friends in the region, including countries where the United States has military bases, that our goal is only to punish the Israeli government," Mr. Amir Abdullahian affirmed. Iran's foreign minister said the country does not seek to target Americans or U.S. bases in the region, but warned it could target U.S. military facilities involved in protection and support. Israel. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, on the night of April 13 launched UAVs, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles at many targets in Israel in response to the airstrike on the Iranian consulate in Syria earlier this month. Israel announced that it had intercepted most of Iran's UAVs and missiles with the help of the U.S. and its allies. Leaders of countries and international organizations have called for de-escalation of tensions after the raid. U.S. President Joe Biden is said to have told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Washington will not participate in any retaliation by Tel Aviv against Tehran. Iraq and Turkey warn of the risk of spreading conflict in the Middle East. On April 14, Iraqi President Abdel Latif Rashid called for reducing tensions in the Middle East after Iran's unprecedented attack on Israel, and emphasized the need to prevent the conflict from spreading. According to the Vietnam news agency correspondent in the Middle East, in the statement, Mr. Rashid said that it is necessary to resolve the conflict in the Gaza Strip and find a solution to the Palestinian issue, because this is a fundamental factor for regional stability. On the same day, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan had a phone call with his Iranian counterpart Hossein Amir Abdullahian, in which Mr. Fidan emphasized that Ankara does not want tensions to escalate further in the region. For his part, Iran's foreign minister said that the country's retaliatory attack campaign against Israel had ended, and affirmed that Tehran would not launch a new campaign unless it was attacked. Also on April 14, the French embassy in Tehran advised its citizens to temporarily leave Iran due to increased tensions in the region. A statement from the French embassy in Tehran stated, "French citizens in Iran should temporarily leave this country." Meanwhile, the Dutch government advised citizens not to go to Israel due to the unstable security situation following the Iranian attack. Israel and Iran criticized each other at a meeting of the United Nations Security Council after an airstrike that caused a stir in the Middle East over the weekend. The mask has been taken off. Iran, the #1 global sponsor of terrorism, has exposed its true face as the party destabilizing the region and the world. Israeli ambassador to the United Nations Gilad Erdan spoke at an emergency meeting of the Security Council on April 14. Mr. Erdan said that masks must be taken off and gloves must be put on, and called on the Security Council to take action. The Israeli diplomat asked the Security Council to designate Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization and impose all possible sanctions on Iran before it is too late. In particular, he mentioned the mechanism that would allow members of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which the U.S. withdrew from in 2018, to reimpose international sanctions on Tehran. As members of the Security Council, we have a shared responsibility to ensure that Iran complies with the Council's resolutions and ends its violations of the Charter, said U.S. Deputy Ambassador Robert Wood. No. According to the U.S. diplomat, in the coming days, Washington will seek additional measures to hold Iran responsible. The Security Council meeting was convened after Tehran's unprecedented attack on Israel on the night of April 13. Iran has launched more than 300 missiles and drones from its territory toward Israel. Iran announced its response to the attack that it said was carried out by Israel against Iran's embassy in Syria earlier this month. The attack killed 7 Iranian military officers, including 2 high-ranking generals. Russia and China on April 14 called for restraint after Iran's attack on Israel, and noted during a meeting of the United Nations Security Council, UNSC, that Tehran had declared its intention to avoid escalation. And they consider the problem solved. On the afternoon of April 14, the United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting on the situation in the Middle East, focusing on Iran's retaliatory attack on Israel on the evening of April 13. The emergency meeting was conducted following a request letter from Israel sent to the President of the Security Council and the Secretary-General of the United Nations on April 13. In the letter, Israel described Iran's attack as a violation of the United Nations Charter and international law. On the same day, Iran's permanent delegation to the United Nations also sent a letter to the President of the Security Council stating that the attack on Israel was Iran's way of exercising its legitimate right to self-defense, citing Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Speaking at an emergency session on this situation in the Middle East of the United Nations Security Council, Russia's representative to the United Nations Vasily Nebenzia said Moscow took note of the signals given by Tehran that it was not seeking to escalate military force. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cancelled plans to immediately retaliate against Iran after a phone call with U.S. President Joe Biden. The New York Times quoted unnamed Israeli officials as saying that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cancelled the plan to immediately retaliate against Iran after having a phone call with U.S. President Joe Biden on April 14. According to New York Times sources, Mr. Netanyahu's cabinet issued a list of measures to respond to Iran's large-scale drone and missile attack on the evening of April 13. Sources said that while some cabinet members favored immediate military responses, Netanyahu chose not to launch a retaliatory strike as requested by U.S. President Biden. Full details of the phone call between the 2 U.S. and Israeli leaders were not disclosed by the White House. However, according to Axios, Mr. Biden told Prime Minister Netanyahu that Israel had basically prevailed in the military confrontation with Iran and advised Tel Aviv to be satisfied with the current results. After Iran's attack by hundreds of drones, UAVs, and missiles on the evening of April 13, Israeli President Isaac Herzog considered Iran's actions a declaration of war and emphasized the severity of the situation. In an interview with Sky News on April 14, Israeli President Isaac Herzog condemned Iran's behavior, describing Iran's attack on the evening of April 13 as another example of Tehran's efforts to sow terrorism, spread chaos, terrorism and instability globally. While stressing that Israel does not seek war, Mr. Herzog described Iran's attack as a declaration of war and called on the international community to send a clear message to Tehran that such actions are not tolerated. Mr. Herzog said Israel's main goal is to protect and defend the Israeli people. Currently, all options are being considered to address the threat posed by Iran, but Israel is not seeking to escalate the conflict into all-out war. On the same day, according to Reuters news agency, Israel's wartime cabinet minister Benny Gantz announced that the country would force Iran to pay the price when the time is right, in response to the large-scale drone and missile attack of Tehran. Speaking on the eve of Israel's wartime cabinet meeting, Mr. Gantz emphasized, "We will build a regional alliance and force Iran to pay the price in a manner and time that suits us." Meanwhile, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said that Israel has the opportunity to form a strategic alliance against Iran after Tehran's large-scale drone and missile attack on Israel was repelled.